Welcome to Gurukul Live Lectures. I am Professor Namita Rajput, Professor in Department of Commerce, Sri Aurobindo College, University of Delhi. In the ongoing series of corporate governance, today we are going to talk on the different committees to improve the corporate structure in India. We talked about the Kotak committee and the Birla committee. So today we are going to talk on improving the board evaluation practices. The first and the foremost way is the objective assessment. There has to be an engagement by a third party facilitation, engage an independent third party facilitator to conduct the evaluation, and this external perspective can actually help uncover the issues that the internal evaluations might miss, leading to a more honest and constructive feedback. Confidentiality and the openness. Independent facilitations can actually ensure the confidentiality, ensure the board members to provide more candid feedback without the fear of repercussion. The focus on both collective and the individual performance. So, board as a whole, you need to evaluate the board's overall performance, including its effectiveness in the strategic oversight, risk management and the governance practices. Assess how well the board functions as a unit. Individual directors. We need to assess the contribution of the individual board members considering their participation, preparedness and overall value to the board. This dual focus helps identify the areas where the specific directors may need additional support or development. We need to align with the evaluations with the strategic objectives. The strategic alignment. We need to ensure that the evaluation process is aligned with the company's strategic objectives, assess whether the board is effectively supported the company's long-term goals and whether it has a necessary skill and the expertise to do so. Now there is a forward-looking focus. We have to incorporate a forward-looking question that challenge the board to consider the future challenges and the opportunities, rather than just reflecting on the past performance. Emphasize the continuous improvement, the actionable feedback. Provide a specific actionable feedback to the board members rather than just identifying the weakness. The evaluation should suggest the concrete steps to the improvement. The follow-up mechanisms. We need to implement a follow-up mechanisms to track the progress on the recommendations from the evaluation. So, this ensures that the feedback leads to a tangible improvement. Enhance the role of the chairperson. The chairperson should play a very vital role in driving the evaluation process, ensuring an active participation and ensuring that the findings are acted upon. The chairperson's own evaluation. The chairperson's performance should also be evaluated with an input from the board members to ensure that their leadership is very effective. We need to promote a culture of a continuous improvement. Based on evaluation outcomes, provide an ongoing training and development opportunities for the directors to address any identified skill gaps. The board retreats. The organized board retreats on the strategic sessions, whether the director can work in a team building, strategic alignment and other areas identified during the evaluations. We also need to foster an environment where the directors feel comfortable discussing the evaluation outcomes and working collaboratively towards the improvement. There has to be a tailored evaluation to the board's specific needs. The customization. We need to tailor the evaluation process to the unique context of the company, considering the factors like the industry size, specific challenges and the company's faces. Periodic review of the process. The regular review and redefine the evaluation process itself to ensure that it remains the relevant and effective. Transparency and communication. You need to share some key insights. Maintaining the confidentiality, share the key insights from the evaluation progress with the stakeholders and demonstrating the board committed to good governance and the continuous improvement. Communicate a follow-up actions. We need to inform the stakeholders about the steps taken in response to the evaluation to enhance the transparency and build the trust. To leverage the technology. Utilize the digital tools and platforms for conducting the evaluation, analyzing the data and generating the reports. These tools can actually streamline the process and provide them a robust analytics. The virtual evaluations, in case where the board operates remotely or across different locations, consider the virtual evaluation methods that can actually still ensure a comprehensive assessment. By adopting these practices, the companies can ensure that their board evaluations are very meaningful, objective, and actually lead to a significant improvement in the governance and the board performance. This continuous focus on the evaluation helps maintain a high standard of oversight and the strategic direction, ultimately contributing to the company's success. We also need to ensure and disclose the standards is very crucial for promoting the transparency, accountability and trust in corporate governance. The high quality disclosure ensure that the stakeholders, including the investors and the regulators and the public, they have the access to the accurate and the timely information necessary to make informed decisions. So, here are some key recommendations for improving the disclosure standards. The first is increase the transparency and detail. The comprehensive reporting. We need to ensure that all material information which is relevant to the stakeholder is disclosed, including the financial performance, governance practices, risk factors and ESG, that is the environment, social and the governance metrics. The granular data. It provides the detailed granular data rather than aggregated information. For the example of a segment reporting should break down the performance by the business unit or the geographic region to a given stakeholder, a very clearer and understanding of the company's operations. Adopted the international best practices. The global standards. We need to align a disclosure with a globally recognized framework such as the IFRS, International Financial Reporting Standards, GRI, that is the Global Reporting Initiatives, SASB, Sustainability Accounting Standard Board. Now, the recommendations for enhancing the disclosure and the standards, the next is your integrated reporting. We need to consider adopting the integrated reporting which combines the financial and non-financial data into a very single cohesive report, providing a holistic overview of the company's value creation process over time. It also enhances the ESG disclosures, materiality assessment. The regularly conducting the materiality assessment to determine whether ESG factors are most relevant to your business and stakeholders and ensure that these are prominently disclosed. The climate related disclosures. We need to follow a framework like TCFD, Task Force on Climate Related Financial Disclosures, to report on how climate risk and opportunities they impact the company's strategy, operations and the financial planning. Improve the quality of the narrative reporting, the clear and concise language. We need to ensure that the narrative sections of the reports are written in a very clear, jargon-free language, making them accessible to a broad audience, including a non-expert. The forward-looking statements. They also include the forward-looking statements which provide an insight into the company's future strategy, risk and the opportunities, while caution is needed, such as disclosures which can significantly enhance the stakeholder understanding. Enhance the timeliness of the disclosures. The real-time updates, whether feasible, provide a real-time or a near real-time updates on the key metrics and the developments, especially those that could materially impact the company's performance or the risk profile. The regular reporting cadence. You need to establish and maintain a regular reporting schedule with the interim updates provided between the annual or a quarterly report to keep the stakeholder informed of the significant changes or the trends. Leverage the technology and the digital reporting. Interactive reports. Use the digital tools to create the interactive online reports that allow the stakeholders to explore the data information in more detail, such as through a dashboard or a customizable views. Then we have XBRL, Extensible Business Reporting Language. We need to implement XBRL tagging to making the financial statements and more key disclosures machine readable, enhancing the ability of the stakeholder to analyze and compare the data. We also need to improve the risk disclosures. The risk identification, clearly identify and describe the key risk the company faces, including the strategic, operational, financial and ESG risk. The risk management strategies. It is actually helping in disclosing the strategies and measures in the place to manage and mitigate these risks, providing the stakeholder with a better understanding of how the company is handling the potential threats. The focus on consistency and comparability. The standardized matrix. Use the standardized matrix and the definitions in disclosures to ensure the consistency and the comparability across the reporting periods and with the peer companies. The historical comparisons. We also need to include the historical data to allow the stakeholders to compare the performance and the trends over time, enhancing their ability to assess the company's progress. Also needs to strengthen the governance and executive compensation disclosures, the board composition and the skills. It also provides a detailed information about the board's composition, include the director skills, experience and independence to help the stakeholders assess the board effectively. The executive compensation, that is disclose the company's executive compensation policies and practices, including how the pay is linked to a performance and whether it aligns with the long-term shareholder interest. It also enhances and ensures the compliance and integrity, that is the third-party validation and verification. Where applicable, obtain a third-party verification assure of key disclosures such as ESG data to enhance the credibility and the trustworthiness, the compliance with the legal regulations. We also need to ensure that all disclosures they comply with the local regulatory requirements while also striving to exceed the minimum standards to demonstrate a commitment to the transparency. The stakeholder dialogue, engage with the stakeholders. Engage with the stakeholders to understand their information, needs and incorporate their feedback into the disclosure process. This can also help in ensuring that the disclosures are relevant and valuable. Accessibility. Make the disclosure easily accessible to all the stakeholders, including through the multiple channels, for example, website, social media, investor presentations, and in multiple languages wherever necessary. Now, one of the recommendations for enhancing the disclosure standards is fostering a culture of transparency, that is through the internal policies. Develop and enforce the internal policies that promote the transparency and accountability in all the communication and the disclosure. The training and awareness. Provide training for employees, executives on the importance of high quality disclosure and how they can contribute to the company's overall transparency. Periodically review and update the disclosure practices, that is continuous improvement. Regularly review and update the disclosure practices to reflect the changes in the regulation, stakeholder expectations and of course the best practices. The disclosure committees. We need to establish a disclosure committee within the company to oversee and review all the public disclosures, ensuring that they are accurate, complete and up to date. So, by implementing these recommendations, the companies can actually significantly enhance their disclosure standards, leading to a greater transparency, improve the stakeholder trust and better alignment with the global best practices. The Security Exchange Board of India, they play a very crucial role in enforcing the corporate governance standards in India. As the primary regulator of the security market, SEBI mandates includes ensuring that the companies listed on the Indian Stock Exchange adhere to the high standards of the corporate governance. The key aspects of the SEBI's role in this area include SEBI, Security Exchange Board of India, listing obligations, disclosure requirement and the Regulation 2015 LODR. SEBI established these regulations to enforce that the corporate governance standards for the listed companies. LODR specifies various obligations for the listed entities, including the disclosure norms, board compensations requirement with the functioning of the audit committee. Now coming on to clause 49 of the listing agreement. Before the LODR, the clause 49 laid the foundation for the corporate governance norms in India, focusing on the board compensation, the role of independent directors, the audit committees and the protection of the minority shareholders. The ensuring of the board independence. SEBI mandates that a certain percentage of the company's board should consist of the independent directors. These directors are expected to provide the unbiased oversight and ensure that the interest of the minority shareholders are protected. SEBI also specifies the qualifications and the guidelines to ensure that the independence and the effectiveness of these directors, enhancing the transparency and the disclosure. The SEBI enforces a stringent disclosure norms requiring the companies to disclose the material information, including the financial performance, related party transactions and the risk. This ensures that the investor have the access to the critical information to make the informed decisions. The SEBI regulations also mandate the quarterly financial reporting and the timely disclosures of any material events that may affect the company's share prices, strengthening the role of the committees. SEBI requires the listed companies to establish the various committees like audit committees, nomination and the remuneration committees and the stakeholder relationship committees. These committees play a very vital role in overseeing the specific aspects of the corporate governance. The audit committee, for instance, is very crucial in ensuring the integrity of the financial reporting process. Now coming on to the role of SEBI in enforcing the corporate governance standards, we talk about the protection of the minority shareholders. SEBI has implemented the measures to protect the rights of the minority shareholders, like requirement for the approval by a majority of minority shareholders in certain transactions. For example, the mergers and the acquisitions. Security Exchange Board of India, it also regulates related party transactions to prevent the conflicts of interest that could harm the minority shareholders. The implementation of the corporate governance codes. SEBI regularly, it updates its corporate governance guidelines to reflect the global best practices. For example, SEBI initiates have led to the introduction of the mandatory whistleblowing policies and the requirement for the board evaluations. The SEBI Kotak committee recommendations implemented in 2018, brought a significant changes to the corporate governance norms, emphasizing the board diversity, enhancing the role of the audit committee, and improving the transparency. Enforcement and penalties. SEBI has the authority to enforce the compliance with the corporate governance standards through the various means, including the penalties, fine, and even the delisting of the companies that fail to comply with the regulations. SEBI also conducts the regular inspections and the audits of the listed companies to ensure the adherence to the corporate governance norms. The encouragement of corporate social responsibility. Yes, we are talking about the role of SEBI in ensuring the corporate governance standards through encouraging the CSR. While CSR is primarily regulated under the Companies Act, SEBI also plays a very vital role in encouraging the listed companies to adopt the CSR practices. The SEBI requires the disclosure of CSR initiatives in the annual reports, thereby promoting the transparency in how these companies contribute to the social and the environmental causes. So, let us see a recap. SEBI role in enforcing the corporate governance standards is extremely vital for maintaining the investor confidence, ensuring the transparency, and protecting the interest of all the stakeholders in the security market. By continuously updating the regulations and enforcing the compliance, SEBI helps to create a robust framework for the corporate governance in India. Now, let us see the challenges. There are some challenges in adopting the corporate governance best practices. Like adopting the corporate governance best practices can be very challenging for the organizations, particularly those that are transitioning from a more informal or less regulated structures. Here are some common challenges which we are talking about as far as the corporate governance adoption practices are concerned. The first and the foremost is the cultural resistance, traditional mindsets. The long established business might resist the changing of the ways, especially if the existing culture is hierarchical or opaque. The lack of buy-in. Employees and even the senior management may see the governance practices as bureaucratic hurdles rather than the beneficial changes. The cost and the resource constraints. Implementing the best practices often requires a significant investment in training systems and sometimes even the restructuring. The ongoing compliance cost. Maintaining the compliance with the governance standards can be costly, particularly for smaller companies with the limited resources. Complexity of the regulations. Navigating the regulations, understanding and complying with the myriad of local, national and international regulations can actually be overwhelming, especially for the multinational corporations. Evolving the standards. The governance standards are not static. They evolve with the new news, market conditions and the stakeholder expectations, requiring a continuous adaptations. Inadequate experience. The lack of knowledge. The companies may lack the internal expertise to effectively implement and maintain the governance practices. Dependence on the external advisors. Over-reliance on the consultant or advisors can be very risky if they do not fully understand the company's unique context. Conflict of interest. The board of independence. The ensuring that the board of directors is truly independent can be very challenging, particularly in the family-owned business or the companies with a significant insider ownership. Alignment with the shareholder interest. Balancing the need of the different stakeholders, shareholder, employees, customers, while adhering to the governance standards can actually lead to conflicts. The next is your disclosure requirement. Increased transparency demands can be met with the resistance, especially in the companies that have historically operated with a limited external oversight. The fear of scrutiny. So, there may be a concern about exposing the internal weakness or the strategic importance information to the competitors and the public. Change management challenges. One of the biggest challenges is to implement the change. So, the transitioning to the best practices require a significant organizational change which can be difficult to manage, especially if the changes are extensive. Then we have the leadership challenges. Effective governance often requires a strong leadership at the board and the executive levels. Not at all the companies have the leaders who are equipped to drive these changes. The pressure for the short-term results. The governance best practices often emphasize a long-term stability and sustainability, which are conflict with the pressure to deliver a short-term financial performance. The stakeholder expectation. Balancing the expectations of the various stakeholders who may have a differing priorities can be a delicate task. The globalization challenges. The multinational companies face the additional added complexity of adhering to the governance standards across the different jurisdictions, each with its own legal and the cultural norms. The diverse market expectation is another challenge. Investors and the regulators in the different markets may have a varying expectations for the governance practices, leading a potential conflict. Then another challenge is the technological adaptation. The need to integrate technology into the governance practices like data protection, cybersecurity is becoming increasingly important and challenging. Staying current. Keeping up with the technological advancement that impact the governance such as the blockchain for transparency or AI for decision making, it adds another layer of complexity. Then we have the ethical dilemma as one of the biggest challenges. Implementing the governance practices that ensure the ethical behavior throughout the governance organization can be very difficult, especially in the industries or the regions where the unethical practices have been normalized. The whistleblower protection. Encouraging and protecting the whistleblower is very essential for the governance but can be challenging to implement effectively. So, addressing these challenges require a strategic approach, strong leadership and the commitment to continuously improvement. The organizations that succeed in overcoming these obstacles often find that the robust corporate governance lead to enhanced trust, better decision making and of course the long-term interest. So, the last thing what we are going to talk on is the future direction for the corporate governance in India. We need to strengthen the board diversity and independence. There has to be strengthening role of the independent directors. We need to strongly go in for ESG reporting, and the SEBI Business Responsibility Sustainability Report is a step in this direction, and the future governance will likely to involve integrating ESG factors into the strategic decision making. The strong regulation of the ESG compliance, the cyber security, the data governance and enhanced stakeholder activism, protecting the minority rights, strategic implementation of the CSR, impact assessment in a new innovative way, ethical governance, whistleblower protection, regulatory oversights that is evolving a role of the regulators, collaborative governance is also a step in this direction wherein there is a shift towards more collaborative governance where the regulators, business and the stakeholders, they work together to create a framework that are both rigorous and the practical. So, this is how we need to move in and adopt the cross-border governance practices, issues, technology, innovation, transparency, real-time reporting. Thank you so much.